Welcome to 2 hours of crazy nuclear and pro-revenge. Hi, I'm Austin. Play this in the background or follow along as you go about your day or evening and hear some of the most insane revenge stories. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Naval officer didn't want to live with enlisted, gets fired. Posted by I Love Boba 43. So this happened about 1.5 years ago, but I recently heard on the news how far my revenge went. I was a Navy enlisted service member and was stationed in Yokosuka, Japan for a few years before I got transferred back stateside. I worked in the main hospital that cared for service members and their beneficiaries. It's a small hospital, so everyone knows everyone. Shortly after I left, I caught wind of a new physician officer working in the radiology department. My friends would say he's horrible to work with, but that's nothing new. However, someone saw him print a letter and he left it on his desk and took a picture of it and sent it to me. He's requesting to move from enlisted housing to officer. Now, I did find out this is not a private letter, and he did actually send it to housing, and most of housing is ran by enlisted members. For context, military housing is available for those who are married, have a family, or are qualified based on their rank and depending on the military base itself. Typically, officer housing is much nicer than the enlisted. In Yokosuka, housing is basically the same all around because it's overseas. But most of the housing are apartments, and each apartment complex is called a tower. So for example, Fuji Tower. There are 9 towers, and 2 are for officers since enlisted members outnumber officers by a lot. Now, one thing about the military, crap happens. When getting stationed, it is the active duty member's responsibility to either apply for housing on or off base before arriving, depending on what's allowed. If there's limited space and you don't apply for housing on time, then you get put wherever there is space. So, our new officer got placed in an enlisted tower. Mind you, enlisted members have families of their own, and other officers have been placed in enlisted housing before without an issue. Here are some of the quotes in his letter, and yes, this guy has a PhD. I have many valid objections to living in a building of almost all enlisted and even many lower enlisted being an officer. There is a lot of crime, violent actions, drug use, and alcoholism that happens in enlisted housing. There are also assaults sexually and other perverts. I have a good-looking family, a wife and 2 daughters aged 3 and 4. They are prime targets to be victims for these enlisted deviant activities. My family should be safe in housing that is with officers. Officers are much more respectable, and these types of deviant activities are incredibly rare compared to the deviant activities of enlisted being commonplace. Other officer families will not want to visit us because our family lives on enlisted housing. My children need to make friends with other officer children. My wife needs to make friends with other officer wives. I need to make friends with other officers. Forcing an officer to live in a large apartment building with almost all enlisted is unethical. You get the idea. So this guy basically looks down on all enlisted service members, assuming every single one are drug users, PERS, criminals, etc. The kicker? He was an enlisted army member before going to officer school. So in civilian terms, think of a manager that discriminates and calls all of his subordinates criminals, violent, alcoholics, drug users, etc. based on your job position, forgetting that some have a family and, maybe aren't any of those things. And he not only has the authority to ruin your work life, he can ruin your personal life by denying days off, making you stay late, writing you up if he doesn't like you, and not letting you promote. Safe to say, everyone was ticked, and I have nothing to lose. I was separating soon, and I figure I'd have some fun before I get out. I created a burner Facebook account and posted the letter and the officer's picture on a popular military enlisted group page. Within 2 days, it spread like wildfire. But I wasn't done yet. The military has something called challenge coins. Think of trading cards, but custom coins that come in many shapes and sizes. I designed one with his face and a big middle finger in the back. On top of that, I designed stickers to show how proud us deviants are. Other coin designs came from other people as well, but so far I think mine was more popular. I sold over 70 coins to the initial person who originally sent me the picture at a huge discounted price so she can sell them for a profit for herself. So the officer's face is everywhere because most people keep their coins displayed on their desk. No matter where the officer went at work, he would see his face on someone's desk. And since it didn't have his name on the coin, can't officially say it's him. I sold more stateside, and even some got sent to Europe. I made about $3,000 overall, which was nice. The story even got featured on the online Naval newspaper and on 2 popular YouTube channels. And if you're military, you know the only time big military care is when it's too big to be swept under the rug. This story got the officer sent up to captain's mast, which is like Navy court. He tried to say his wife was the one that wrote the letter, but no one is buying it because her writing style is way worse. She even tried to take the fall, but no one believed her. They both ended up deleting all social media. Due to this, he got served 3 UCMJ articles, which basically are his offenses. But there's more. When you're in the military, you have a deadline on how long you can be a certain rank. If you don't pick up, then you're kicked out. And because he's new and got served UCMJ articles, he won't be up for promotion and therefore was involuntarily separated. Also, the officer program he went through pays for his PhD. When the military pays for your PhD, you have to serve 10 years to pay them back. If you don't complete 10 years, you have to pay the military back with money instead of time. So he lost his job and now has to pay back the military for his PhD. And since it takes a while for the paperwork to have him and his family sent back stateside, you can bet he socially suffered because no one worked with him. Oh, and by the way, the hatchet became a symbol of enlisted deviants because in his letter, he stated that 2 gangs were attacking each other with hatchets and other weapons at an enlisted housing unit. Now this comment says that I remember when this got international press attention. All the Navy said was he had been disciplined but would not release details. And OP said that he found out from buddies who were stationed there when it all went down, and angry cops did a follow-up. Like, dude, you have a position of power and importance in the military, you do something stupid, take a fall, and blame it on your wife who even tries to go with you and help you out, and then nobody believes it because hers is worse. I don't even know. I just want to know what you think in the comments. What? Revenge on the movie producer, posted by Kibu Fox. Please allow me to note well in advance, this story is not mine. In fact, it's a rather popular story in the town that I once lived in, Savannah, Georgia, and it centers around one homeowner who got royally annoyed with a movie producer. There will be a note at the end about the fellow the story is about for those interested. Okay, so first and foremost, when movie producers are looking for places to set a movie that takes place in colonial or even 1800s cities in the US, due to the sheer number of parks, wide roads, and period houses, they'll often select Savannah, Georgia. They'll pull up all the Spanish moss out of the trees or trim it back, pour dirt on the roads around the squares, and effectively backdate that part of the city to fit most any place, even up to some having used the area as a setting for places like early Washington, D.C., and even places in Britain or France. Typically, when producers do this, they will pay each homeowner whose house is used as background flavor a couple $1,000s for the licensing to do so. That'll be important later. Trust me. They issue some rules like no electric lights being visible, not coming out of any door that faces the street, and you have to move your automobiles away from the drive if you have a drive. Well, in 1979, a producer came from Hollywood with the intention of using Savannah for that very purpose. Specifically, the producer was from one of the big 3-letter TV channels and was working on making a made-for-TV movie talking about the events after the assassination of Lincoln and the subsequent accusations of the doctor present at his death. The production went to the city to seek permission and then sent an announcement out to each of the homeowners telling them of the various days that the shoot was going to take place. However, much to their downfall, they also noted that the production company would not be compensating the homeowners for the use of their homes as backdrops. This was met with some great annoyance by the homeowners, who turned to the city for help only to be told that it was their civic duty to allow the use of their homes. Most everyone agreed to this and bit their lips. One homeowner, however, didn't. He decided to get revenge on the production, attempting to screw up their shooting every chance he got. He first started by leaving his car out in front of his house only to have it towed before filming started. He threatened legal action against the studio, but that fell on deaf ears. He forbade the use of his home in some of the shots, but the production company got the city to make him back down. Eventually, enough was enough. So he waited, biding his time until it was certain that they were filming. When the day came that his house was being used as a background shot, the homeowner grabbed a massive Nazi flag and hung it out in front of the house out of one of the top windows. The production company balked. They knew that this ruined any shot they'd use there. And what's more, they started to question just when he'd put the flag up. Was it just the one day? Or had all the previous shots, some of which showed the house from across the square, been ruined as well? They turned to the city for help, and the city just basically shrugged, saying that it was his First Amendment right to do that, and implied that had the production company paid the homeowners as had always been done before, then this probably wouldn't have happened. In the end, the production company had to end shooting and go to the homeowner begging for him to remove the offending flag. He did eventually do so, but only after his lawyer got a contract in writing that required the production company to pay all the homeowners for having their homes in the shot. The flag came down and the shooting wrapped in less than a day. Interestingly, it's said that in the movie in question, The Ordeal of Dr. Mudd, there are several shots where you can see that bright red flag flying from one of the homes in a distance. That stunt cost the producer quite a substantial amount of money and pushed production back at least a year while they tried to find every single instance that flag flew in the background shots. This homeowner would go on to himself become very famous, though not for a good reason. Even so, he lives on among the legends of that city, both for his revenge against a movie producer and his later brush with fame. The fellow in question is none other than Jim Williams. Williams was an American antiques dealer and a historic preservationist based in Savannah, Georgia. He played an active role in the preservation of the Savannah Historic District for over 35 years. Williams was arrested on May 2, 1981 for the alleged murder of 21-year-old Danny Hansford, with whom he had been having a relationship with at Mercer House. After the subsequent 4 trials, a record in the state of Georgia, Williams was finally acquitted by a jury in Augusta in May 1989, 8 years after his arrest. Williams died in 1990 of heart failure, though AIDS is also suspected. He is the center of the story, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil novel, and later Clint Eastwood movie. Talk about standing up for your neighbors, holy cow, what a guy, but then to find out his other shady past and passing away a year after he was acquitted by a jury, oh my goodness, what a roller coaster of a story. What do you think? My boss stole my Super Bowl tickets, so I made him lose a major client, posted by Branson on. I'm a huge 49ers fan, the rabid all-day tailgate in the parking lot type. A few years ago, we made it back to the Super Bowl. I was working at a consulting firm with a handful of accounts that I would interact with directly. One client in particular knew how big of a Niners fan I was. I was the day-to-day lead on his account. He really liked working with me, and we became friends, often grabbing drinks or dinner after our meetings. He had access to a pair of extra company seats to the game and, as a thank you, wanted to give them to me as a gift. He passed the tickets over to the partner on that account, who I will refer to as Jerkhead Partner, to be given to me as a surprise. The game came and went. We lost, and it sucked. The next time we met, we went to drinks afterward, and he mentioned, hey, by the way, why didn't you go to the game? I heard someone else was in your seats. I asked, what game? He said, the Super Bowl. Confused, I answered, I didn't have seats to the Super Bowl. He told me that he gave Jerkhead Partner a pair of his company tickets for me as a gift so I could attend. I had zero idea what he was talking about. He looked shocked, told me to quietly ask around about it and get back to him. When I was back in the office the next week, I found out through one of the secretaries that Jerkhead Partner had given a pair of Super Bowl tickets to another one of his clients as a gift from our company. I might have let this sort of thing go to keep the peace under different circumstances, but these were seats on the 30-yard line to see the freaking 49ers play in the Super Bowl. I was ticked. I considered confronting Jerkhead Partner myself, but I realized that it was a client who had noticed that I wasn't there in the first place, so if I let him handle it, there would be no blowback on me. So I texted him, oh hey, I just wanted to thank you so much for thinking of me with those seats. It appears that they were given to another one of our firm's clients. He texted back right away in all caps, are you kidding me? And then, pretend I never told you, let me handle it. He followed up with me about formulating a plan. A few days later, we were asked to come down for a meeting in their office. The client requested the partner be present, not entirely unusual, so Jerkhead Partner and I hopped a flight the next week and headed over to their office. Little did Jerkhead Partner know, my client had orchestrated a wonderfully awkward little show to catch him red-handed. When we entered the conference room, it was all the usual suspects, along with a woman in her 30s we didn't recognize. My client immediately introduces, Jerkhead Partner, this is Stephanie such and such, VP from this other department. She wanted to sit in on this meeting. Hey, OP, you guys must already know her from the Super Bowl. She then responds as she goes to shake my hand. Oh, I don't think so. Did we meet there? I'm sorry if I forgot. Client responds, geez, Steph, how much did you have to drink? They were sitting right next to you. Client looks at me and says, sorry, client, I wasn't there. Are you thinking of someone else? At this point, Jerkhead Partner is looking visibly uncomfortable, probably trying to come up with an excuse. He starts in with an, when Stephanie says over him, no, so-and-so from other company were in the other seats. By the way, I was wondering why we gave company seats to those guys. Is there a project that we're working on with them that I don't know about? Obviously not. They were in completely different industries. It would be like Coca-Cola partnering with John Deere. Jerkhead Partner lets out an, oh, again, and the client immediately speaks over him, asking, Jerkhead Partner, I gave you those seats for OP? At this point, Jerkhead Partner is turning bright red. He responds, well, he wasn't able to make it, so he must have given the seats away to someone else, and turns to me, looking for me to cover for him. Client smirks at me. I respond, what are you talking about? Client, you gave me tickets to the Super Bowl? Client suddenly raises his voice. Jerkhead Partner, those tickets were a personal thank you gift from me to OP. Did you give them away to someone else? Was it another client? Jerkhead Partner butts in with, maybe they, I don't know, got mixed up somewhere in the office? Client went quiet for what probably seemed like an eternity to Jerkhead Partner. He then looked down, grabbed his portfolio and iPad, put them into his briefcase, and said, I think this meeting is over. OP, it seems as if I owe you a thank you gift. Let's go to lunch. Stephanie, you're welcome to join. Jerkhead Partner, I need to evaluate our relationship. Please go back home and expect to hear from us next week. Jerkhead Partner suggests he would like to join, presumably to do damage control, and Stephanie sternly tells him, I don't think that's a good idea, and asks the front desk to see Jerkhead Partner out. As soon as he is in the elevator, we all break out laughing hysterically. Stephanie wasn't really a VP, just an employee at the company who client had drafted into helping with his pre-planned meeting skit, but she did end up coming to lunch with us and was a fellow Niners fan and a total blast to hang out with. On our way to the restaurant, I got a desperate text from Jerkhead Partners saying that I needed to cover for the firm and that we could discuss things when I got back. I replied, yeah, we need to talk, but I'll see what I can do. Client told me to wait a couple hours and then respond to him. 1. To expect invoices for the resale value of the Super Bowl tickets, and resale is way above face value. It was over $10,000, as well as our lunch. He picked a pricey spot and made a big show of overspending, and that he expected them to be paid immediately. 2. Expected I be given a direct apology. 3. Expected a written apology to his company for what he considered theft. And 4, he will only interact with me or another one of our firm's partners, never Jerkhead Partner. This whole thing caused a stir with the other partners and actually came off looking great because it appeared that I had made a good faith effort to save the client for the firm despite being the victim in this situation. The client would transfer to another partner, which meant Jerkhead Partner lost his profit share on any work with them. Oh, and the other partners in the firm made Jerkhead Partner pay the invoices back out of his salary. In retrospect, I really have no idea what the heck this guy was thinking. Did he seriously believe the client would just not notice me not thanking him for Super Bowl tickets? Anyway, the well was kind of poisoned for me there long term because Jerkhead Partner wasn't going anywhere. I left the firm a few months later for a much better position. Client ultimately terminated their relationship with that firm a year later, and he actually now works with a good friend of mine at a competing firm. I'm still ticked that I missed out on the Super Bowl, even though we lost, hoping that we make it back this year so I can finally go to one in person. Go Niners! Oh! Okay, look, the Super Bowl is the biggest televised football event with million-dollar commercials, multi-million-dollar, and how are you going to sneak that one by? It's like going to Walmart, walking in saying, "I'm stealing something," and walking right out with the whole entire store on your back. What? Young firefighter disrespects a lieutenant, so I shame him and get him to quit. Posted by Eric Smith 98105. I'm not sure if this is pro or not, but I got revenge on a Dbag I used to volunteer firefight with. This was in the early to mid 2000s. I decided to go to the local fire department as a volunteer firefighter. I did it for about 5 years, and it was great. Training consisted of 3 months of fire training, 2 nights a week and all day Saturday, and then you would go to EMT training, which is another 3 months of training. I was about a year and was asked to help train some new recruits. One of the lieutenants, Amy, was a short, middle-aged woman who was so full of fire that she could make a grown man cry. One of those people who commands both fear and respect wherever she went. Honestly, a great lieutenant and a great person. When she wasn't being a drill sergeant, she was extremely kind and generous. She would often bake people cakes and treats and deliver them to the various stations in our department. However, in this new academy class that I was asked to help with, there was a cocky kid that we'll call Aaron. Aaron talked big during the training and acted like he was the all-American hero, like he was going to be the lead bad A in Backdraft 2. He performed moderately well in training, but far from the top of the class. He gets assigned to Amy's station, which is a pretty quiet station in the department. A few months after he starts, Amy swings by my station one night to say hi. She brings us the motherload cake from Claim Jumper, which is a massive 6-layer cake. She explained that she had treated her crew to a night out at Claim Jumper, which must have cost a lot of money. I think she took out about 8 people and bought a whole cake to top it all off. They had eaten the first 2 layers, so she gave us the remaining 4. We thanked her profusely when she left. Back then, the big social media platform was MySpace, and I decided to look up some of the people in the department to make friends. I came across Aaron's page, and I noticed some photos of him and the rest of the crew at Claim Jumper with Amy. However, when I read the comments, he bragged about how he had purposefully ordered the most expensive dinner, appetizers, and drinks since Amy was buying. He bragged about how he was going to take advantage of her, quote, stupidity. This alone ticked me off because she was doing this super nice and generous. What an ungrateful, selfish jerk. Then I read the rest of his profile. He had videos and memes on his page glorifying himself as a bad A firefighter, bragging about running into burning buildings and how he was such a hero. He was flirting with girls, blatantly trying to impress them with how brave he is. Bear in mind, he just graduated from the academy 3 months prior and hadn't even gone to EMT school. He had never been to a house fire, and all he basically did was carry gear for the other fully qualified firefighters. It was too much for me to tolerate. So, here is the revenge. I printed off copies of his MySpace page, including his comments about Amy and toxic bragging. I made multiple copies and took them to every station in the department. We all had pagers, I'm old, and a small keyboard at each station to send out text messages. I made an anonymous, all-staff page to everyone in the department. I had to keep it brief since I couldn't fit a ton of characters, but I sent out his MySpace info and told everyone about how he treated Amy. Within an hour, Aaron had cleared out his MySpace page of all posts, photos, and so on. A couple of days later, he deleted his account. It's a good thing I made so many copies. Immediately after this happened, he stopped coming to volunteer, and a few weeks later, I heard that he had quit. I later talked to Amy and admitted that I was the one who sent the page. I told her I hated how he treated her, and she thanked me. She seemed really sad and hurt by what he had done, but being the tough short lady that she was, she quickly got back into being an actual bad A firefighter. She later started dating and married a fire chief that also helped at the academy. I've lost touch with her, but I hope she did well. She seemed pretty happy when I last saw her. And by the way, I can't stop laughing about how this story ignited a firestorm about Claim Jumper's motherload cake. Look, Aaron, from one A name to another, dude, if you post it online, it's about your work or a volunteer place, it's gonna be found out, you're gonna get busted. What are you thinking, man? You can't just delete it. Stop it right now. Goodness gracious. Lying and using people? I got you. Posted by Don't Give Up the Shoe. This one needs background to fully understand why I went out of my way for this revenge. My best friend was married for 10 years, with his ex for a total of 13 years. He was absolutely head over heels in love with her like I had never seen before. which I never understood due to her alcohol abuse. She would always take it out on him, and when he'd be venting about it, he'd always fall back on, "It's not her, it's the illness," a very respectable and admirable stance on it. Last year, she asked for a divorce because after years of what I would call abuse, he had simply run out of gas. Her reasoning for asking for one? When she got fired for testing positive for MJ, he wasn't empathetic enough. He admits he wasn't because it had come on the back of one of her drunken tirades where she told him he was a piece of crap who always was trying to control her, when all that he ever tried to get her away from was booze for the way she treated him when she was drunk. It took him forever to move on from this, with the divorce following shortly after. And earlier this year, after thinking he was moving on, he calls me to come over and he's in a bad way. I arrive and he is absolutely fall down level of drunken. Going on that she didn't ask for a divorce for those reasons, that she had really been cheating with several other people. The next morning, when he's more coherent, I ask him how he knew. He was cleaning out the spare room and selling or donating stuff that he didn't need anymore, and when he went out to clear an old tablet, she was still logged on and all the evidence was there. He gets that out and says he's going back to bed and asks me to lock up when I leave. Before I left, I looked at the tablet. After seeing what I saw, I wanted to find a way to get even with this horrible and conniving woman. So I took pictures of it all and left. When I got home, I started looking up information about these people. 2 of them were just normal guys. Whether they knew she was married or not, I don't know. But the third comes up as a registered sex offender. Still on probation for being such a disgusting pile of crap, and address listed as 123 Lane, City, State. Jerk knew that she was married. I immediately knew what I was going to do. Jerk didn't live at 123 Lane. Jerk was living with the conniving ex. She made regular posts about their time together, and on top of that, she's an avid MJ user and has several firearms because she enjoys sport shooting. So I go into the state's offender site and make a report of Jerk not actually living where he's registered, and that Jerk is living in a home with what he has no right to, being a convicted felon and on parole. I include screenshots of the social media post and all to back it up. I was thinking little would happen, but an inconvenience to their lives. Boy, was I wrong. She broke her typical post with nothing serious trend on social media yesterday with this gem. "My year can't get any worse. Jerk lost his job and I am now facing eviction because I can't afford my rent." So I go onto the state court system site to see if it's related. And yes, it was. Jerk was rearrested. She clearly can't post bail or Jerk would be out. The job she took after being fired definitely can't support her lifestyle, so he's probably going back to prison or at least jail, and she's a breath away from being homeless. I don't know if I'd ever tell my best friend that I was the one behind this, but he is definitely ecstatic to see a horrible woman and a sewer rat get what they deserve. Part of me wants to put up the offender registration link and that it's sitting in jail and say something to the effect of, "Well, it's a little more than losing a job," but not wanting to make my best friend's life harder, I'll just let sleeping dogs lie. Again, what are you doing? You put it online, you're gonna get found out, you're not being faithful, you're gonna be punished, as you should be. Man, you messed that guy over so hard. Way to go, OP. How I got a car dealership to give my friend a newer car, posted by Reddit admin Dumb87. Circa 2020 January, my friend makes a stupid decision and buys a brand new car he can't afford. His insurance is like $400 a month. He makes like $10.25 an hour working as a shift supervisor at McDonald's. His car payment is $795 a month. Now at $10.25 an hour, 30 hours a week, that's a weekly income of about $300 a week, or around $1,230 a month. So yeah. So my friend came up to me for help because I used to sell cars and I know the industry pretty well. I go over his paperwork. The dealer did rip him off, but my friend is trying to find a way to get out of this mess. And ripping someone off, it isn't illegal. They did, of course, overcharge him for warranty. They gave him a higher APR, they had add-ons and so on, but none of that's illegal, and I know the only way I can get my friend out of this deal is if they did something illegal. So I look at his finance application that my friend signed. It correctly listed his income, which turned a light bulb on in my head. No bank is going to approve someone for a $795 car payment if they're only making $1,200 a month. It just doesn't make mathematical sense to do that. So I started searching through his paperwork for the finance app that the dealer submitted to the bank. You oftentimes, when you submit a finance application at a dealership, the dealership will take the hand-filled application out and then reproduce it electronically. This is pretty normal. However, on the application the dealer submitted to the bank, the dealer said my friend was a GM of the McDonald's and made $70,000. My friend had good credit, so it doesn't appear like the bank asked for a proof of income. So I go to the dealership with my friend and I tell the sales manager he's going to want to put me in touch with the GM because we're going to be unwinding my friend's deal and giving his trade-in back. The sales manager thought I was joking. The GM also thought I was joking. Then I demonstrated how his dealership finance department committed bank fraud. I showed the GM the finance app that my friend filled out, and then I showed the GM the finance app his dealership submitted to the bank and pointed at the income difference. My friend really made $14,000 a year, and the dealership claimed my friend made $70,000 a year. That's bank fraud. That's a felony. So let's keep this simple, shall we? The GM sees his dealership is in a load of crap. The proof I am presenting to him is rock solid. He knows it, I know it, and we're all on the same page. He goes, "Oh, okay, so what can we do to make this right?" I go, "Unwind the deal and get my friend his trade-in back." Unwinding the deal is basically the GM agreeing to cancel the deal and basically erasing the deal and pretending like it never happened. GM tries to avoid that, but I remain firm and remind him that we can easily take this documentation and turn his life into a living heck. He knows I'm right. My friend also needs a car to get to work the next day. The GM says he'll check into it, and he comes back and tells me that, well, unfortunately, they sold his trade-in already. I said, well, that's fine. Just unwind the deal and let's put my friend into something as good or slightly better than what he traded in for. So the GM goes, so he'll buy a car similar to his trade-in? I said, no, you'll give him a car similar to his trade-in. GM goes, it doesn't work that way. I go, well, it does when you commit bank fraud. GM is upset with me, and I remind him I'm being really nice, and this situation can totally get really ugly. Like felony level charges ugly. Like losing your franchise ugly. So yeah, this is gonna hurt, but it's gonna hurt less my way. So the GM goes, oh, all right. And he looks in his inventory and he tells me that they have a 2007 Focus with 10,000 more miles. I tell him, no, the car you give my friend needs to be the same or better than what he traded in. The GM counters, well, I'm giving him a free car. And I go, no, you took his trade-in, you sold it, you made money on that sale, you also committed a felony in the process of selling him his new car. You are now correcting that mistake. This isn't a free car for my friend, this is you are correcting your mistake. GM insists that's what he's willing to do. I tell him that if he can't do better than that, we will go to a consumer protection attorney and have a conversation with them. My friend didn't want to go this route, but it was our plan B. So we get up. The GM says, wait, just please give me a second. The GM goes, I have a 08 Civic. It has 5,000 more miles, but it's a Civic and not a Focus. I unwind the deal on the new car and put your friend in the Civic at no extra cost. We agree. The GM has the paper drawn up, the old loan on the new car is canceled, and they take in the new car again, but because it's already titled, they'll have to sell it as used, and well, that sucks for them. And they gave my friend a better car than the one he traded in. For people asking why we didn't get a lawyer involved from the start, well, we could have done that, but courts take a long time, and this was a faster way to fix the situation. Knowledge is power. Learn everything you can, apply it, and you will be like OP and his friend and make a great way out of this deal here. Way to go, OP and friend. It is a really bad idea to make a government employee angry. Posted by Reaper0221. This one is a double government employee event, and what you should know is if you get the attention of a government employee and make them angry, they'll make your life a living heck. Sorry this is a long one. The setup is that I was working for a local county government in the permitting department that handled drainage and floodplain enforcement. I received a complaint from a homeowner, nice guy, who lived next door to a house that was part of an incorporated village, not nice guy. Nice guy lived in an unincorporated portion of the county, and hence the call to me as an agent of the county. I drove out to the site and to investigate and discovered some interesting facts. The permitting agent for the village allowed the incorporated homeowner to fill his lot, affecting the drainage, which caused the unincorporated lot to flood every time there was anything more than light rain. Nice Guy indicated that there was some tension between him and Not Nice Guy, and part of the issue was that Nice Guy and his partner were a gay couple. This ran up a red flag for me, but in trying to be impartial, I took the information and some photos for the file and indicated that I would contact the village to find a resolution. I wrote a letter and then called the village inspector, Jackwagon, to discuss. I was told by Jackwagon that the village could do as it pleased and that I could do nothing to stop Not Nice Guy from doing as they pleased, as it was approved by the village. There was then a comment about those type of people, the gay couple, making complaints just to cause trouble. I was now on the case and it was time to make sure everything done on the incorporated lot was 100% legal. At this point, the game certainly was now on, because if there's one thing that grinds my gears, it's bullying. I went back out and spoke to Nice Guy to let them know what I was up to, and also that I was not going to let this slide. I then started investigating the elevations on the two lots and what fill had been placed on the incorporated lot. The Not Nice Guy came out and started getting belligerent about my presence and the ongoing investigation. He incorrectly stated that I did not have jurisdiction over his lot and that he would be calling the police. I patiently listened and then pulled out my two-way radio and requested that a home-based dispatch both a village and a county police unit to the location. I then indicated that since there was a regulatory floodplain on his lot, I did in fact have jurisdiction and that I would be exercising my right to determine the impact of his fill activities upon that floodplain. Both of the police units showed up and I let them know what was going on. They were both appropriately agitated to have to waste their time and let Not Nice Guy know that I was within my authority to proceed with the investigation. A little while later, while I was measuring things, Jackwagon showed up. He started berating me about harassing the village resident and threatening to call my boss and filing a complaint and so forth. I invited him to do so, quoting which parts of the code he should indicate that I was violating. I was using marking paint to show the limits of the floodplain for the photos for the file, and what do you know? Jackwagon's shoe got painted when he tried to stop me. Obviously, he was even more angry, as was the homeowner, due to the very bright orange paint in the grass in his yard. I pointed out that I had done the same on the neighboring lots, but they just kept complaining. It was actually marking chalk that comes off pretty easily. Interestingly, I found two really wrong things on Not Nice Guy's lot. Number one, there was fill placed in the floodplain, and 2, a garden shed was built on the fill and partially within the floodplain. Both are a big no-no and are actually against federal law. So, the course of action had 2 parts. 1, make the incorporated homeowner remove the fill and the shed from the floodplain, and 2, let Nice Guy place fill in their lot outside of the floodplain to counteract the fill remaining in Not Nice Guy's lot outside of the floodplain. I also told Nice Guy that it would be a good idea to run a field tile on their side to drain the water that would inevitably pond up between the 2 lots when it rained. Predictably, Not Nice Guy and Jackwagon got super angry when I sent the letter out that there were violations that either had to be corrected, which is remove the fill in the shed, or apply for a revision of the floodplain with the Army Corps of Engineers. Good luck with that. This then led to a meeting at the county office with Not Nice Guy, Jackwagon, my supervisor, and myself. Quickly, things went to 11, and there was yelling by Jackwagon about abuse of power and so on. The department head came to the conference room and told them both they were wrong and that they should leave peacefully and comply or face the consequences, which were fines. The best part was that Not Nice Guy had to apply for a permit, and guess who was the one to review and approve it? That's right, yours truly. Now, I was following the letter of the law, but you have to know that poor government workers are underpaid and overworked. Strangely, the permit for Nice Guy was almost immediately approved, while Not Nice Guy had to have a very thorough review to ensure it was correct. You could make a case that I was abusing my power, but I can assure you that the timing for their review was well within acceptable limits. Also, how could I be held to account that they misfiled 3 times before they finally got it right? Generally, if you behaved like a civil human and came to the office, we would help you get things done properly so the permit would go through first time. But Not Nice Guy decided he could do it all on his own, so it took him 3 tries. Had he come to the office, I would have given him the same service as others, but he decided to take the hard route, and therefore I didn't give a single inch when it came to the submission being perfectly correct. Ultimately, the situation was resolved, but it took a lot more effort than it should have. Moral of the story: don't be an entitled homophobic a-hole. I swear this ProRevenge is like malicious compliance too, because he followed the book on his end and the other guy just made it harder on himself. OP wins. What do you think? Greedy owner tries to rip off my friend, ends up paying him double. By satisfaction call 1572. My first job out of college was for a local TV station. The owner was, and still is, the worst human being I've ever met. This guy has money, but he will cheat and lie anything to get out of paying his bills. When I started working there, the owner had just signed a contract with DirecTV to become a part of their broadcasting package. Since they were at the time purely a local TV station, this meant that we had about 2 months to upgrade our system so that we can start broadcasting to DirecTV customers in the entire Bay Area. Every day that we failed to do this past the deadline means that the owner would suffer a penalty per the contract. Not knowing about how any of this works, the owner hired a friend of mine to come in as a freelance consultant. My friend told him that for about $15,000 USD, he can get a system that will automate the entire process, which, of course, the guy didn't want to pay. He tasked my friend with finding a cheaper way, around half, and to pay for all of the hardware up front and get reimbursed later. Knowing what a piece of crap this guy is, I warned my friend not to front the money because he wouldn't get paid back. The guy just smiled and said, "Watch me." So he made it work, we went on live on schedule, and the owner was happy. Then my friend went in and presented the guy with a bill. Immediately, the usual excuses start. "Oh, I'm a little short this month. Can I pay you later?" And so blah, 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 blah. Then my friend pulls out the trump card. Not only did my friend threaten to take all the equipment back and take the station off the air, he reveals that in order to get the uplink working for cheap, someone had to come in every day and code the broadcast manually. It's not a terribly complicated procedure, takes like less than 5 minutes, but of course, no one else at the station knows how to do it but him. So either the owner can pay him what he's owed plus $2,000 a month consulting fee, or the station goes dark and he starts paying the penalty to DirecTV. This effort paid fast. So instead of $15,000, he ended up shelling out more than double that amount as my friend lapped up his $2,000 a month fee for close to a year before he felt bad and finally taught someone there how to do it. Moral of the story, only thinking about short-term gain will always cost you more in the long run. You know what? I would be so curious to see this guy's 401k or retirement plan, because if he can't hold on a deal in this kind of short term, I'm very curious to see how he's planning for his future. Like, what do you think he's doing? Would you like to see it too? Brother ruined my wedding by proposing, so I ruined his proposal. Posted by NeitherGlove4355. I, 35-year-old male, have a younger brother, Todd, who's 29, who had a complicated birth and had to stay a month in the ICU, and because of that, my parents have always doted on him and almost denied him nothing, even if it was to the detriment of my sister Abby, who's 32, and I. My brother drinks in on the attention, and he has on more than one occasion made himself the center of attention at either my sister's, or a cousin's special event. Because of this, Abby and I have a strained relationship with Todd and our parents. Unfortunately, Todd met and fell in love with Lucy, who's 24, who announced her own pregnancy at the baby shower my mom held for Abby. When I proposed to my wife, Michelle, who's 30, I just wanted to elope, but she really wanted her family to be there, so I invited my family out of obligation. While our best man, Jim, 35, noticed a receipt from a jewelry store slipped out of Todd's pocket. Jim confronted Todd about this, which led to an argument. Jim told me everything, and I told Todd that he was no longer going to be a groomsman because I knew he was going to propose at my wedding. Todd cried to our parents, which led to a blowout. In my parents' eyes, since Todd never admitted that he was going to propose to Lucy at my wedding, I was unfairly judging him. I refused and brought up Todd's past behavior. My parents couldn't refute this and got Todd to agree to not try anything at my wedding. This wasn't enough to convince me to let him be a groomsman, but I warned him that if, as a guest, he'd try anything, I would make him regret it. Fast forward to the wedding, and surprise, surprise, Todd walked over to Lucy and proposed to her during Michelle's father-daughter dance, and did it in a way so that everyone would notice. Cue my revenge. Jim and I had hired a woman to pretend to be Todd's side piece, who cornered Todd and Lucy and claimed that she was pregnant with his baby. Todd denied this, but when she called his phone, I gave her his number and messed with Todd's phone to incriminate him. It didn't look good. Lucy threw the ring back at Todd and left in tears. When Todd saw the smile on my face, he knew that it was me, and I didn't respond to a single call or text from him or my parents until after the honeymoon. Lucy has thrown Todd's stuff out and has been denying access to their kid. Todd is furious and demanding that I clear his name. I sent him a text saying that I had no idea what he was talking about, as well as a screenshot of a bill for the wedding, and gave a vague message demanding reimbursement for half the wedding cost. Michelle knew the whole time what I was planning and gave me the green light after Todd ruined her moment with her dad. So I felt pretty good, but now even Abby thinks I went too far. Holy cow, I mean, I gotta be honest with you here. That is a pretty borderline pro-revenge. Like, it's kind of dirty. Like, it got revenge on him, but oh man, at what cost? That was brutal. What do you think? Military revenge served hot, posted by Bakatari. Back in my army days, I was once in command of a unit of about 80 soldiers in Hawaii. Dialogue sections are the gist of what was said, but it's been a minute, so they're not exact. Names changed and so on. Most of the soldiers in my command were great people, happy to do their jobs and take home a paycheck. Hard workers, creative, adaptable to unusual army conditions, and generally reliable. But there was one who was trouble from the start. Gentle reader, meet Private Wiggles. My first awareness of Wiggles came 2 or 3 days after I'd taken over command of the unit. We're prepping for a month-long training exercise to Thailand, and Platoon Sergeant Maggie tells me Wiggles might not be able to go as she just had an outpatient medical procedure. Departure is about a week away, and I have to validate the personnel roster to make sure we've got logistical support for everyone we're bringing, transportation, food, lodging, and so on. So I talk directly with Wiggles and ask if she's okay to travel and participate in the exercise. Wiggles says it's not a problem, she can handle it. We get to Thailand and set up camp on a Thai army base. 2 days in, and the medical section sends a runner to find me. Wiggles is at our medical clinic, which are tents with cots and surprisingly extensive medical supplies, laid out with extreme abdominal pain. I cruise over to the clinic tent, and the physician assistant, PA, on duty, tells me a couple things. Wiggles acknowledged recently having a personal procedure, the previously mentioned outpatient medical procedure, and the PA's examination and testing shows that Wiggles has had the single worst case of pelvic inflammatory disease, PID, that he's ever seen. Seriously, this Army PA, who has seen all sorts of crazy crap from soldiers, was emphatically impressed by how bad it was. Wiggles developed PID from failing to get treatment for STIs for a long time, as in, she's almost glowing from it. No judgment on the personal procedure, not everyone is ready for kids, and the STI-induced PID can be treated with high-dose antibiotics, which the PA has on hand. Not a problem, we've got this covered. Wiggles is released to Sergeant Deb, her section sergeant, who will make sure Wiggles takes her antibiotics and keep an eye on her for any further issues. Sergeant Deb finds me and First Sergeant Bob about a day later and tells me 2 more things about Wiggles. She's refusing to take her antibiotics and she wants to get out of the Army. I again talk with Wiggles. I say, "So you want out of the Army? You know you have a couple of years left on your contract, right?" "Yeah, I know," Wiggles says, "but I'm just about done being a soldier and I want to be out of the Army." I say, "Okay, I can make that happen. You don't want to be here, then I don't want you here either. But here's the deal. You gotta play by the rules. I can get you out with an honorable discharge and I'll start the paperwork as soon as we're back in Hawaii. But you need to take your antibiotics, do your job, and be where you're supposed to be. You do your part, and I'll do my part for you. Sound good?" "Yep, I can do that." Spoiler alert, she couldn't do that. For the rest of the Thailand exercise, Sergeant Deb had to take control of Wiggles' meds and force her to take them, when she could actually find Wiggles, who consistently found someplace else to be. At one point in the next week or so, she accuses First Sergeant Bob of doing things with her, easily disproven as he doesn't have any STIs and Wiggles has all of them. She was just trying to stir up trouble with wild accusations, I guess. We get back to Hawaii and I start the process to get her out of the Army, because as much as she's been a handful of trouble in Thailand, I'm thinking it's still easier at this point to kick her to the curb than it is to keep her around and punish her before kicking her out. I was wrong. Even as I start to work on her discharge, she ramps up the stupidity. Here's a few examples. Wiggles gets caught drinking, only 19 years old. Wiggles and her husband lie to the on-base housing office and provide forged authorization documents to get into rent-free on base housing that they didn't qualify for. Side note, Mr. Wiggles was no winner either. He was about to be dishonorably discharged from his infantry unit for selling drugs to other soldiers. Wiggles shows up at the infirmary to get treatment for facial bruising. Mr. Wiggles kicked her in the face while wearing his combat boots when Wiggles accused him of cheating on her. Wiggles refuses to show up for work or any unit formation and can't be found anywhere for days. Wiggles slashes all 4 tires on Mr. Wiggles' car and then attacks him with a knife when he confronts her. Military police are called, end up taking him in when Wiggles gives a sob story. But he's the one with defensive wounds on his hands, not her. One of my male sergeants uses my open door policy to visit me one day. He tells me he saw Wiggles stripping at one of the skankier gentlemen's clubs down in Honolulu the night before, and she had also convinced one of our other female soldiers to come along with her to do the same. Here's a weird one. I get a call from a temp agency asking if it's okay for Wiggles to continue working through them as an administrative assistant for clients in town. Not uncommon for soldiers to have a second job, but with everything else she was up to at the time, this one just had me going, what the heck? There's more, but you get the idea. At this point, Wiggles' actions are egregious enough that I can no longer just kick her out with an honorable discharge. I put her on notice that she's at risk for a court-martial. I thought that threat might keep her in line, but she just couldn't seem to stop herself from getting stupider and stupider. It's the old 80-20 problem. 80% of your time is spent dealing with 20% of your folks who are troublemakers. At this point, I'm wasting a not insignificant amount of time dealing with Wiggles' issues almost daily. I had genuinely and in good faith offered her the easy path, but I guess she figured she'd try to burn the place down on her way out, since apparently she thought she was getting what she wanted no matter what she did. I was reminded of what my old platoon sergeant used to say when I was coming up through the ranks. You want to get stupid? Go ahead, but I can get stupider. Cue the revenge. She's causing me daily headaches, so I'm going to bring the pain back to her. Honorable discharge paperwork is out the window, and I lean into the special court-martial process instead. My legal counsel tells me that Wiggles' activities are likely to get her a couple weeks confinement at most, maybe not even that. She may get a monetary fine, and she'll probably get an other than honorable OTH discharge, which has potential for a bad conduct discharge, which are worse. But while her actions have been, quote, not that good, they're also, quote, not that bad. I'm rational enough to understand that. I have a brief chat with Captain Morgan, Wiggles' military defense attorney, about where I'm going with this case. During our chat, I try to be a gentleman and let him know that Wiggles is going to be trouble for him if he's not careful. He gives me a condescending, "This isn't my first rodeo, Baka. I'm a big boy and I can take care of myself." Fair enough. I tried to warn you. Normally, a soldier getting a special court-martial for piddly crap might get confined to the barracks, restricted to their on-base quarters, or something similar for the duration of the process. It's not like she killed someone, right? However, my military legal counsel drops this little gem in my ear. He tells me Wiggles has met all 5 of the conditions, danger to others, flight risk, and so on, required by military law, which is a Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ, to warrant requesting confinement prior to her trial. He tells me if you can remember these 5 conditions and elaborate on the details at our next pretrial meeting with the military magistrate, you might be able to get her confined to the Navy brig at Ford Island until the trial. I'm a guy who likes to pay attention to sound legal advice, so I do just as he says. A couple of days later, we go in for the pre-trial meeting and I run down the list for the magistrate. Boom! Magistrate orders Wiggles to be confined in the brig through the trial. First Sergeant Bob and Platoon Sergeant Maggie go to pick her up from her on-base housing. She won't open the door, but they know she's inside because they can clearly hear her and Mr. Wiggles doing stuff. This is important for later. The Wiggles finish up, she takes her time getting showered and dressed, and finally comes to the door when it pleases her. Off she goes to the brig. The pre-trial processes take up the next 4 weeks. During that time, I have to deal with Captain Morgan, the paralegals in his office, and various fun things to do with her pending court-martial. Other than that, it's blissfully peaceful. Wiggles chills in the brig for 4 weeks. Seriously, chills. Every time I had to visit, it was freezing in there. I was required to make weekly welfare visits to see if she's being mistreated, if she has any needs that aren't being met, and so on. Seems weird, but as her commander, I'm still responsible to make sure the brig staff aren't mistreating my soldier. Other goings-on in this time period are: Mr. Wiggles fraudulently applies for a car loan and gets a van in their names. Mr. Wiggles is dishonorably discharged and kicked off the island. He flies home to wherever the heck he originally enlisted from. Captain Morgan asked me to consider an OTH discharge and time served in lieu of taking things all the way to trial. I'm hot to get that pound of flesh from her, but my legal counsel advises me to avoid the court-martial and just kick out Wiggles with the OTH discharge. After all, he says, she's already been locked up for almost 3 weeks, so the magistrate will probably just give her time served and the OTH anyway. See my earlier comment about sound legal advice. My boss, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan, thinks I'm too invested in the case, that I'm no longer objective. LTC Ryan insists on coming with me to the brig for the next welfare visit. This is 3 weeks into Wiggles' stay in those luxurious accommodations. Among other BS lines she throws at us, Wiggles tells us she needs to see the dentist about a feeling that's giving her trouble, and, quote, Motrin just isn't working. At the end of the visit, LTC Ryan tells the guards about Wiggles' feeling, asks if they can give her anything stronger than Motrin, and then instructs him to follow up with the dentist. Guard actually laughs out loud at this and says, no sir, Motrin is the best we can do in the brig. And the other thing, for the last 2 weeks, she's been telling anyone with ears that she wants to try getting her wisdom teeth pulled before she's kicked out. She doesn't have a problem with any feelings. It was hilarious to watch LTC Ryan's face go from obvious concern for Wiggles' well-being to outright fury, and the next words out of his mouth were, that witch lied to me. I make arrangements with Captain Morgan to accept his request for time served and OTH in lieu of court-martial. Sometime later that week, I get a call from the brig. Wiggles is pregnant. Remember the scene at her house 4 weeks prior? And they can't keep her confined anymore because of it. She has to be released back to her unit until the court-martial or other actions are complete. Captain Morgan stakes his reputation on Wiggles being a good girl until we can send her back home to Carolina. He'll come to regret that, and he can't say that I didn't warn him. We get Wiggles back from her 4-week, all-inclusive stay in the brig. I've accepted Captain Morgan's request to avoid the court-martial, and I confine Wiggles to the barracks under supervision for the 9 days she has left until her flight to Carolina. Immediately, we have another crap show. Wiggles is smoking in the barracks. Not a big deal that she's smoking, it's just not allowed inside barracks rooms. Wiggle is caught with a bottle of hypnotic liquor in her barracks room. She's still only 19. Wiggle slips out of the barracks and runs off for a day when her platoon sergeant gets distracted from supervising her. First Sergeant Bob and Lieutenant Ricky, the executive officer, go to collect Wiggle's belongings from her on base housing so we can box it up and ship it to her home. And they find that Mr. Wiggles has left behind a bunch of stuff he stole from other soldiers. Body armor, military equipment, and some ammunition, smoke grenades, and explosives that he stole during trips to the range. All lined up right inside the front door where it's impossible to miss. They call me, asking what to do. I say, just collect it all, return the equipment to the central issue facility, and dump the ammo and explosives in the nearest amnesty box. Mr. Wiggles obviously meant for Wiggles to take the fall for having it. Husband of the year. If we take that bait, Wiggles will be here forever. I don't want that. Do you? Lieutenant Ricky says, nope, I don't want that either. It'll be like it never happened. In light of all this drama, I bring Wiggles into my office to remind her of her agreement to be a good girl till she leaves the island, with Lieutenant Ricky as a witness in my office to protect my butt. I say, Wiggles, you're in violation of your release agreement from the brig. You've been sneaking out of the barracks, you've been smoking and drinking. She cuts me off and says, yeah, and doing all kinds of drugs too, with a heavy sarcasm voice behind her. I say, well, be that as it may, I'm giving you fair warning that you're at risk for losing the deal I made with Captain Morgan. Additionally, you're pregnant again. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but most damage to a fetus from alcohol and smoking will come in the first few weeks after conception. I don't know if you're planning to keep this one or not, but at the rate that you're going, this baby's going to be born dumber than you. Wiggles, gaping like a dang fish, picks up her jaw off the floor. She then bolts from my office and runs down to Lieutenant Ryan's office at the other end of the building to squeal on me for insulting her. Lieutenant Ricky is hot on the heels. She tries to rush into Ryan's office, but Ricky gets in first and fills him in. Ricky tells me later how it went down. Wiggles is yelling about how I called her stupid, strangely a vanilla thing to focus on considering everything she's done, but you do you, and that she's being mistreated. Ryan yells at his admin to go get Captain Morgan on the phone, now. He reams Captain Morgan for his client's foolishness, tells him to frickin' fix this, and makes various threats to Captain Morgan's career. About a half hour later, I get a call from Captain Morgan. Baka baka baka. Yes, he did that whole patronizing BS. I can't believe the words I'm hearing from Wiggles. I'm shocked, just shocked, that you would use language like that and call her names. Side note, my mom is an attorney and I grew up with tales from the courthouse about lawyers using exactly this sort of hyperbole. Your Honor, I'm shocked, appalled, and dismayed that the opposing counsel would attempt to paint my client in such a light. It's the kind of BS they said when they didn't have a good argument. So, as soon as I hear the word shocked, I know I own him and immediately cut in. And I bet you're appalled and dismayed too. Captain Morgan's now stumbling around and sounding slightly confused. Well, yes, of course I am. You can't talk to soldiers like that. I know of a lieutenant colonel, a commander, who called one of her soldiers stupid, and she's no longer in command now. I said, I didn't call her stupid. I informed her of basic biological facts. Not my problem if she takes the news poorly, and arguably, she's not all that smart. Anyway, you called me, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't to warn me about what I said to Wiggles, so what do you want? Morgan says, what will it take to prevent you from kicking back our deal? Apparently, Ryan cinched his butt up good and tight. I said, you could get her on a plane tomorrow. Morgan says, how about if I get her out of here by Friday? It was Wednesday, and she was due to fly out by the following Wednesday. I said, I don't think you can manage that, but good on you if you do. To his credit, Captain Morgan gets Wiggles a flight for Sunday, 3 days early. I print up official orders appointing Ricky as a military escort specifically for her. Ricky drives her to the airport, and the airline desk agent calls me to verify his status when they get to the check-in counter. They give him a special pass to get through security with her. He stays with her at the gate to make sure she gets on, and stays on, the plane, and then stays at the gate until the plane is in the air. Some boogers are hard to flick. We wanted to make dang sure that this one landed someplace else. About a month later, I get a call from the military police about a derelict van in the parking lot with all 4 tires slashed. Guess who that belonged to? It's really kind of sad when I look back on it. I mean, I had 2 other soldiers come to me at different points asking to get out of the Army ahead of their contracts. One just didn't want to be in the Army anymore, and the other did want to stay in the Army but had family issues that would be a lot easier to deal with as a civilian. They played by the rules, and I got both of them out with honorable discharges and all the benefits. They even qualified for unemployment. Too easy. Wiggles could have had the same treatment. I told her exactly what I could do for her, and then had to shift gears and told her exactly what I was going to do to her. And then I did it. I could have been her best friend on the way out the door, but instead I ended up owning her and her dummy defense attorney. She screwed herself out of transition benefits and access to the VA, and picked up a lifelong black mark for employment. All because she couldn't play nice for a few weeks. She decided she wanted to play frick around find out games, and we all know what happens next. This is a gold medal ProRevenge because time after time OP tried and tried but just said, you know what? You can only help someone so much before you have to put it back in the ball in their court, because no matter what you do, they as an adult have to make that decision to change. Hard as that is to accept, it's tough, but that is just the truth sometimes. So way to go, OP. You did what you could, but at some point you can't do any more for your own mental health. What do you think? Revenge is a dish best served cold. Mine has been cooling for 10 years and counting. Posted by PettyAF452. I, a 40-year-old female, have been married to my husband, 44 male, for 20 years now. We have 2 kids, 16 female and 13 male. My husband is what I would consider a high earner by middle-class standards. Also, strap in folks, this is going to be long. I've never told anyone, so... 10 years ago, and by complete coincidence, I found out that my husband has been cheating on me with men, and that from before we got married. We live in a smallish town in the south of the USA, and him coming out as gay will have consequences. I believe that that is the only reason he's not come out to anyone. First, here's how I found out he was cheating on me. He got sloppy, left a credit card bill for a secret card in the pocket of a coat. While going through it, I found all the telltale signs of infidelity. Payments to a hotel in a nearby county, restaurant bills, gifts, flowers, certain items, and so on. I started camping outside the hotel on days that he told me he would be late, and I saw him bringing different men there. I am very good at compartmentalization and have a great poker face. It comes with growing up in an abusive household, so I was able to give myself the time to cool off and to come up with what I should do. First thing I did was getting an STD panel since I didn't know how safe he was with his partners. It came out negative. Then I convinced him that we should use items since I was having side effects from the pill, and he was okay with it. I had a long think, and I came up to the decision that I was not going to confront him, nor was I going to leave him. He was able to provide me a really good lifestyle, one that I would never be able to afford with my high school diploma, like a cleaning lady, a nanny to help with the kids, regular spa days in a country club, a new car every other year, luxury family vacations every year. And he was a good dad, a good partner, cheating aside, and really good in bed. But I was not going to let him have a single guilt-free week in his life. That would be my revenge. I started small, planning great date nights for us, telling him that I felt our relationship had cooled and that I wanted the spark back. Then I would sometimes slip into conversation some tea about a cheating husband, a gay man that has been using his poor wife as a beard, complimenting the only gay couple we know for having the courage of being real men who were out and proud of themselves. On the other hand, I would praise him as the perfect husband to anyone and everyone, especially if he was in earshot. The amount of guilt gifts I got was astounding. The man was even sending me flowers weekly. It continued the same way for years. I could literally see how much it was weighing on him. Me? Well, my parents were part of a commune with the concept of free love, so I was the same. I just considered myself in an open marriage. It seems that cheating is easier to ignore if you are not that big on monogamy in the first place. And my husband was keeping me satisfied, so I felt no need to find a partner of my own. Then, 4 years ago, I guess he met the love of his life. He started seeing just the one guy. I was seriously thinking of ending the whole thing, especially since I've started a business by then and was able to bring in enough money to support myself and my kids while maintaining my lifestyle. But then, he went and introduced his side piece to us. He freaking brought him into our house, introduced him to our kids, and that was enough for me to keep tormenting him. Apparently, he was a new friend he made while golfing. He started hinting at moving to another state, one where it would be easier for him to come out. I refused. I told him that my business was here, and I was not going to start over in another state. Also, the kids had their friends and extended family here, and it would be unfair to uproot them. Then, he started trying to start arguments. I guess he wanted us to fight, and then asked me for a divorce. I just stopped all those arguments in their tracks. I would just agree with whatever he said. He was right, I was wrong. And, to make it up to him, how about a nice dinner and some great hanging out time? He hated that. I knew, from spying on his phone, that doing stuff with me felt like cheating on his boyfriend. The audacity of this man. I also knew that his boyfriend was pressuring him to leave me almost every day. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He started drinking, and when it got too heavy, that was when I decided that enough was enough. I wanted to ruin his life, not his health. Also, I grew up with an alcoholic father and did not want that for my kids. So, I gathered all the evidence of his infidelity over the last 9 years, photos with different men, conversations, his Grindr profile, even though he no longer had one, everything. Then, I hired a divorce attorney and mailed the evidence to his employer. He has a morality clause in his contract, and adultery breaks it. All his relatives, including parents, as well as our church, I was never big on religion like him. It was like a bomb exploded. He was fired. The congregation turned on him for cheating, not for being gay. Let's keep that straight. I would never allow my kids to be a part of a church that was discriminating against their father, even if he was not out. His parents wouldn't take him in after I kicked him out, and he was shamed publicly. Gotta love that small town gossip mill. And the cherry on top, his boyfriend was run out of the town, and he couldn't follow him because he wanted to fight for custody of our kids. Now, almost a year later, I am a free woman. I got to keep the house, my car, and my business. He got 75% of the retirement and investment accounts, but he won't be paying alimony. I got full custody, and he got visitations. I also got child support. He had to move 6 hours away to find a new job. Couldn't put the last job he worked at his whole life as a reference. His relationship with his family is rocky. His reputation in town is ruined, so he can't move back anytime soon. The love of his life left him for good, and my kids only tolerate him because I did my best to shield them and to tell them that he is still a good father to them. I also made sure to treat him politely, never talk bad about him, and had a lengthy talk about how their father being gay is okay. It's who he is, and it's not his fault. That the only wrong thing he did was hiding it from me. So, I guess the results of his cheating was years of guilt, followed by a ruined life. Now here's an edit. Let's make something clear. I am not the good person in this story. We were both bad. I'm not here trying to get pats on the back or to be told that I did well. I know that what I did was messed up. I'm here because I wanted to tell someone, and I can't do that in real life. So when you read the comments, people are saying OP should not have been manipulative. And yes, manipulation is bad. And also, cheating is bad too, so both sides have messed up here. A Fitting Twist by Oscar the Grouch. Background. I had a pretty terrible childhood. Don't get me wrong, I've heard of way worse, but it was far from healthy or normal. When I was young, my parents were millionaires, my father's parents owning several of the largest businesses in the region. They divorced before I was a teenager, and both of their lives plummeted downhill. By the time I was 16, I was living on my own. Drugs, alcohol, and addiction have long since killed them both. Neither of them ever worked a job since I was a teenager. Both of them died homeless before the age of 50. Situation: I joined the military and left town without ever looking back. As more years passed, I added more and more distance, physically and mentally, from my parents. When I was 20, I learned that my mother had been arrested for stealing a large sum of money from my grandmother, who was living on her own but in the beginning stages of Alzheimer's. The state ended up pressing charges against my mother because my grandmother would not. The detective told me that they had to because my mom and her POS boyfriend were, quote, fueling the criminal underground, end quote, where she lived. I was lost and shocked. I knew my mother had problems, but until this moment, I'd always viewed her as sort of a forest hippie. This is the moment that is the catalyst for my nuclear revenge. You see, my grandmother was pretty wealthy. Terrified that she would be locked away in an old folks' home, she entertained the leeching of my mother and her POS guy. The problem is that it was never enough. Even after my grandmother bought my mother a house down the street from her, she continued to rob her own mother blind. She also fed my underage sister a stream of drugs and brought her in on the con. It ultimately resulted in my mother and sister getting their first felony conviction, grand theft and check fraud, which my mother tried to pin on her own daughter, quote, because she was just a minor. A few years later, I was newly married with my first child and freshly returned from my first deployment to Iraq. We just completed another move across the country, and I'm starting a new job at a new unit. I get home from work and have a strange short voicemail from my uncle, who is like the okayest guy I've ever met. It literally just says, "My mom is in the psych ward at the big hospital in her town. She left everything in your name. I'm flying back home." This is where I learned that the legal document my grandma had me sign when I was 16 made me the executor of her estate, power of attorney, and so on. My unit arranges a very generous amount of time off to fly across the country and deal with this bizarre scenario. She lived alone in this massive house. My mom had destroyed the house my grandmother bought her and then moved into my grandmother's house on the auspices of caring for her. There were so many fleas inside that contractors I hired to make repairs wouldn't go inside. Needles everywhere, and for some reason, everything was an ashtray. It was an insane thing to witness and experience. I still refused to interact with my mom at this point in my life, but now that I had the keys to the kingdom, aka access to the pot of gold, she tried to worm back into my life with renewed vigor. I always told her just to screw off. My grandmother, in the meantime, had been deemed unfit to live on her own. I was 23 with a new baby in marriage, if you remember, so I made the poor decision to put my grandmother in a nursing home. I fixed up the house, rented it to create passive income so she would not deplete her savings, and headed back home. Of course, Grandma is spicy and got kicked out of her swanky retirement home when she broke a coffee cup over some other lady's head for snooping around in her room. She was apparently wearing my grandmother's shoes when she got clocked. The same woman, a resident, had propositioned me in front of my wife when we were touring the facility. She was a different kind of the same spicy as Grandma. Her only option after the incident was a psych ward. So, my senile grandmother moved in with my family, and she lived with us for more than 5 years until her care was just out of our capability. This is about the time that I exacted my revenge. The nuclear option. When the state filed charges against my mother, way back when I was 20, part of her restitution included a lien that was placed against her property in the name of my grandmother for a little less than $100,000. Some years later, my mother had not paid her property taxes in so long that she was about to lose the house. She called me to explain that the lien would not be paid if the house was auctioned, which I knew was not true, but I saw an opportunity. I eventually worked out a deal with her. She would sign the deed over to me, and I would then sell the house and pay for her to move somewhere else. I fly to town, meet her, and sign the deed over. She expected me to use my name and credit to get her a luxury apartment. She also wanted me to buy her a new truck, and let's not forget the moving company. I rented her a U-Haul truck and got her a storage unit that I had paid for 6 months. Then, I put her and her crap head up in an extended stay for a little while. I fixed up the property and sold it to the same rental group that bought my grandmother's house shortly before. I used the money to buy annuities that enable my grandmother to live in a normal house with a live-in nurse and care at 1:4 ratio, which is amazing for her. She still might run out of money because of what my mother did, and I honestly don't know what'll happen then. She's got some years before I have to worry, and she's just shy of 100. My mother was on the street within 6 months. The last time I saw her, she looked like the crazy person who lives under a bridge, and she did at one point. She was covered in sores, balding, and methed out. She'd received a Social Security disability back payment of what would have been a significant amount for her. She died in a hospital less than 3 days later, partied herself to death. The POS dropped her off at the curb and never saw her again. I told dude I would give him some money if he gave me the key to the storage unit. Somehow, years later, she'd managed to keep it. I shared the loot with my siblings, gave POS $100, and closed that chapter of my life permanently. I mean, it literally doesn't get much worse than what happened to the mother at the end of this story. Absolutely crazy fall. I mean, what would you expect this? What do you think? Let me know. Food thieves at university got lesions from my food, posted by the man with 2 poo brains. I was reminded of this by a post somewhere else where someone asked if they could legally put laxative in their coffee creamer at work because it was being stolen. The answer was no, by the way. In the first year at university, somewhere in the west of England, I lived in a large Georgian student house which had 23 under and postgrads living in it, all lads. We had 3 kitchens, but some people would raid other fridges, and I was sick of people stealing my food. In microbiology, we were doing some experiment with an orthopox virus. Think of it as a much less severe version of cowpox, harmless enough that they let first-year students use it with only masks, gloves, and glasses. Anyway, one of my lab partners didn't use sterile techniques on her inoculating loop particularly well and ended up with a blister on her lips. She used to heat it too quickly and create an aerosol. Eventually, I was fed up with the thievery and took a little sample of said virus and added it to a block of cheese. A couple days later, the 2 perps also had a couple blister-type lesions around their mouths, which lasted a few days and meant they didn't want to go out. They had an inkling it was me, but I made some cheese on toast in front of them while ensuring I wasn't cross-contaminating, so it came away unscathed. The cheese gets hot enough to denature the virus. My food was never touched again, but I often think how risky this was. Oh, you're literally playing with fire here when you start messing with viruses, chemicals, and infecting people. Oh, this is definitely nuclear revenge, and I would be very, very careful if I was doing... I actually wouldn't do this, actually. No, I would not. Pro-Army Revenge PAR is par for the course, posted by Sloppy Ice Cream. Dear reader, I had an illustrious 21-year career in the United States Army, USA, which miraculously concluded with an honorable discharge. 21 years and 14 combat deployments produce a lifetime of stories. The overwhelming majority of memories are comical and worth remembering. Like the time I borrowed another human's truck, or the time I relocated an artillery display in my barracks room. However, some memories are extra ammunition after a live fire exercise, LFX, worth donating to Chuck and Barry. Memories suppressed so well they never happened. However, these memories can be unintentionally triggered. I worked at the bad place before attending assessment and selection. Working there was the sole reason for attending selection. The bad place, TBP, was a 3-star command and nursing home for dying careers. TBP was a mixture of National Guard, Army Reserve, active duty, and Department of Army civilians. It was essentially a foreign planet for a soldier who had grown up in regiment and the 82nd Airborne Division. Overnight, I had transitioned from airborne infantry to the equipment tracking officer. It was my sole purpose in life to source pre-deployment training equipment, or PDTE, for deploying National Guard and Army Reserve units. These units would request specific types of equipment, and it was my responsibility to source at least 2/3 of the requested equipment. I should mention, my boss at TBP was Department of the Army Civilian, DAC. I had 10 years of service under my belt, and it was the first time my direct supervisor was a civilian. Now, I have no issues with civilians, but I do have issues with horrible leadership. Mike was horrible. I mean, Mike was a dirty diaper full of crap and always on my butt. Side note, I say that I feel the need to mention TBP recently moved. And you say moved? Yes, Deep South one day and the Midwest the next. Aliens? Nope, Base Realignment and Closure, BRAC. Wait, what? The Army decided to close some bases and expand others. You reply with, "Oh, so what's this have to do with the story?" OP says, "There was 2 active duty soldiers and 2 Department of the Army civilians performing the duties of equipment tracking officers in the Deep South. None of them moved, and all continuity was lost." You reply with, "Okay, there had to be some kind of transition though, right?" "Yes, all 4 of them spent countless hours informing me how terrible a human Mike was via email." Oh, story time again. Dear reader, I had no earthly idea what my job was or how I was to perform it initially. Making matters worse, I would quickly learn that Mike had no earthly idea either. Mike only knew what Z, final product, looked like and was mentally unaware of the other 26 letters in the alphabet. Mike was less useful than a blinker fluid and football bats. Fear not, dear reader, it only took 3 months of working, from 5 o'clock to 2300 hours, to garner a nascent understanding of my roles and responsibilities. That's 11 p.m. Thankfully, I had wonderful counterparts at sister organizations. Furthermore, they were all equally aware of how useful Mike was. Fast forward 4 months. The section was still composed of exactly 1 sloppy, or me. I was 25% of the total allotted manpower, performing 100% of the duties. "If you wait until the last minute, it only takes a minute," was my battle cry. Life was grand. I had developed standard operating procedures, or SOPs, and automated matrices to assist me. I was even starting to catch errors from the department that validates equipment requests. Do note, remember, it was my duty to source 2/3 of the equipment request. I had a very unpleasant one-way conversation in August of 2011. Captain Richard Cranium was requesting that I provide 3 Rhino buses for training. Dear reader, I kindly explained why fulfilling this request was unfeasible. Problem solved, right? Nope. I then received a call from Lieutenant Colonel Richard Cranium. I then received a call from Colonel Richard Cranium. The issue quickly became a self-licking ice cream cone of chaos. Ring, ring, ring. I say, "The bad place, G4 Equipment Tracking Officer, this is Rank Sloppy speaking. How may I help you, sir, ma'am?" Caller says, "This is Major General Richard Cranium from the California National Guard." Side note, civilian readers, the Major General is the boss jerkhead for all National Guard soldiers in the state of California. Sloppy or me does not get calls from general officers. Ever. How can I help you, sir?" He angrily says, "I am calling to inquire as to why you will not fulfill our equipment request. Is it not your policy to provide 2/3? Dear reader, I was now a bit agitated. I had clearly explained the issue to the company commander, battalion commander, and brigade commander. I now have an irate God-level commander on the phone, and 2 courses of action are cycling through my mind. I could kindly explain why this request was absurd, or I could go full regiment sloppy. Slot machine sloppy. Pulls lever. Wheels are spinning and still spinning. Regiment sloppy. Sir, I clearly explained to the previous commanders why I cannot fulfill their request and provided other options. I don't want options, Rank Sloppy. I want my 3 Rhino buses. With my time to get fired attitude, I said, "Roger, sir. Well, as I told the previous commanders, there are only 5 Rhino buses that exist on Earth. 3 of them are deployed to Iraq, and the other 2 are in Afghanistan. Do you wish for me to forward this equipment request to Forces Command, 4-star General?" Cranium says, "Oh, that won't be necessary, Rank Sloppy." I say, "Are you sure, sir? I mean, I can." "No, did you explain all this to—" "I explained it to every single one of them, sir." He says, "Disregard, I have some phone calls to make." Dear reader, the world was right again. At least I thought it was. It appears that the Major General was slow to contact his subordinate leadership. The Colonel had contacted Mike demanding that I supply his unit with Rhino buses. One would think that a simple explanation would suffice for Mike, but one would be wrong. Common sense is an elusive, fickle creature for Mike. It was like trying to explain what number the letter purple tastes like. Mike says, "Did you tell a unit they can't have a piece of equipment?" I say, "Yes, sir." "Why?" Well, because there are only 5 of them and they are deployed to combat zones? Well, you need to figure out how to get them. Is this man frickin' serious? My brain says, laughing, I think he is. I reply, like, call the Pentagon and ask them to redeploy them from combat because some unit needs to train with them? Mike angrily replies, it's not your job to validate equipment. It's your job to source it. Do you understand? With my lip service, I reply, Roger that, sir. Dear reader, when one door closes, check for an open window. I had over 90 units on my desk and 30,000 pieces of equipment to source for the month of August. It didn't take long to find a window to crawl out of. I found a unique request from an infantry unit. They requested a plethora of equipment and it all made sense, minus 4 pieces of equipment. My brain said, pretty sure those 4 pieces of equipment need to be on a different type of request, right? Yeah, but it's not your job to validate it. Oh, right. Dear reader, I sourced it, all 4 of them. It was not an easy task either. I literally had to scour the entire country for available inventory. I made phone call after phone call to make this request happen. None of the items were collocated. They would need to be transported from the far stretches of the continental United States, and failure was not an option. I had fulfilled my responsibilities. I sourced the equipment and turned it over to Mike for signature. Mike's signature magically allocates funding and authorizes the transportation of said equipment. Dear reader, crap typically rolls downhill. However, this specific request defied the laws of gravity. Crap was going to roll uphill. I crawled back through the window and waited a month for the fallout to ensue. Truth be told, due to my heavy workload, I'd forgotten about my magnificent accomplishment. It was another horrible day at work until I received a magical phone call. Ring, ring, ring. I say, the Bad Place, G4 Equipment Tracking Officer, this is Rank Sloppy speaking. How may I help you, sir, ma'am? Caller says, hello, I am Sergeant First Class Ricky Bobby. I am the Long Range Surveillance Platoon Sergeant for unit name. Hey, Ricky, how can I help you? Well, I am looking at 4 helicopters and I am told I need to sign for them. Me, in yes mode, I say, let me look at your request. Shuffling noises ensue. Oh yes, you requested 2 UH-60L Blackhawk helicopters and 2 UH-47 Chinook helicopters, correct? Yes, but I requested them for SPIES, which is Special Purpose Insertion Extraction System, and FRIES, Fast Rope Insertion Extraction System Training. I'm not a pilot. What the heck am I supposed to do with 4 helicopters? I'm laughing back and say, once you sign for them, they're yours. I suppose you could try to fly them? Him, laughing, replies, frickin' Army, suppose I could. Don't worry, man, I've got your back. I've already coordinated with our aviation validators, and they're going to support your request. I'll give you their number. Ricky Bobby says, I'm ready to copy. It's 8675309. Thanks, man. Call me back if you have any issues, brother. I'll walk upstairs to G3 operations and get this sorted so you boys can do SPIES and FRIES. We'll comply, man. Dear reader, not only does crap roll uphill, but crap rolls uphill faster than I expected. I had just hung up the phone and was departing for lunch. I didn't make it 5 feet before I was beckoned to Mike's office. There are 4 chairs in Mike's office, one with a load-bearing capacity of at least 400 pounds, and 4 normal people chairs. I was awkwardly surprised to find that it was already standing room only. The G4 Colonel, Deputy G4, and G3 Colonels were already in Mike's office. Mike says, it seems we have an issue, Rank Sloppy. My brain's like, we? Really, I'm not aware of any issues, sir. Well, unit name is at Fort Hood, and the battalion commander is wondering why one of his platoon sergeants signed for 4 helicopters? I reply shocked. Did they request 4 helicopters? I can go get the equipment request. I have it right here in my hands. I'm puzzled. I'm like, okay, did they request? Yes, they did. I don't understand. The issue is, the G4 Colonel replies, we needlessly ship 4 helicopters across the United States. G3 Colonel chimes in. There are already helicopters at Fort Hood. Helicopters and pilots there to support SPIES and FRIES training. They are there specifically for this type of request. G4 Colonel says, Rank Sloppy, Did this request not look odd to you? My brain is laughing hysterically, but I actually say, "Oh, absolutely, sir." The entire room with shocked faces, just baffled as heck. G4 says, "Then why did you source it?" Then I go back and retell the entire Rhino Bus saga. "Sir, as I understand it, it's not my job to validate, it's my job to source it. Mike made it very clear on multiple occasions." Mike angrily says, "Rank Sloppy, do you realize that you just cost the Army over $100,000 to ship equipment we didn't need to ship?" Sir," G3 chimes in, ticked off, "No, Mike, you just cost the Army over $100,000. Sir." "Mike, it is your signature that authorizes allocation of money and shipping. Did you tell Rank Sloppy it's his job to source, to not validate anything and just only source?" "Sir, I did, but..." G4 Colonel starts walking out. "Mike, let's have a meeting in my office." My brain thinks, "Oh, that sounds bad." But yeah, Mike, not us. And I say, "Right," and then retreat to my desk. Side note, I know the G3 Colonel. We had worked in the same unit when he was a major. He follows me and sits on my desk. Laughing hysterically says, "How in the heck did you do it?" I'm like, "Do what?" "Find four helicopters." I called everyone. I leveraged my network of contacts and made it my mission. What did your counterpart say about the request? They have the same sentiments towards Mike. G3 shaking his head. Honestly, that's impressive. Sir, I was going to get crap on either way, so I decided, screw Mike. G3 replies, "Yup, screw Mike, I guess." Dear reader, thank you for reading and listening to my petty Army revenge. I have good news. I no longer worked for Mike after that interaction. Other misdeeds stories came to light after that encounter. I had a long desk side meeting with the G4 Colonel and fully detailed my relationship with Mike. It's nearly impossible to fire Department of the Army civilians, but it was easy to move me. The G3 Colonel found a more suitable position for an infantryman. It also sucked, but he gave me ample time to prepare for assessment and selection. I was at TBP for 18 horrible months before I found greener pastures. I could lament on all the horrible things, but it's not worth it. Why? At least I know where to go if I ever need 4 freaking helicopters. Cheers, Sloppy. I don't know what to say other than this is nuclear pro-revenge, because he stuck to the book malicious compliantly, just destroyed Mike figuratively by moving himself over, and just completely just set the stage for chaos, and it worked. Way to freaking go, OP. I salute you, dude. I salute you. Stiff me on overtime? Cue the long, expensive revenge. Posted by Deleted. This happened in the early 2000s when I joined a startup. We agreed on a salary and no paid overtime and an evaluation in 3 months and then annually. Standard stuff mostly. It was a very mediocre salary for the work, but I really liked the work itself, which was extremely interesting and challenging. For me, even if the finances were so-so, I felt I'd learn a lot of skills which would be useful in the future. After 3 years of having 10 decent clients and a bunch of clients trialing and money rolling in, the talk turned to back pay and paid overtime, plus compensating for past overtime. At that point, around $50,000 in overtime had been accrued, which is a lot. Legally, it couldn't be back pay, so the talk was always of a discretionary bonus. Now, at this point, everyone is okay with this, myself included, and this was discussed in writing via the company emails too, so I felt secure and that no bad will was in play. I felt the company should be able to afford the payment, and equally, I'd happily settle for equity at a discount, which is legally possible there, if cash flow was an issue. The discussions about back pay, possible equity, and now started to drag on, and I was getting irked by this. In the end, I was made an offer of equity, which meant the company valuation was far beyond anything reasonable, in the hundreds of millions, and I'd get a minuscule stake, less than 0.01%, of a company with 9 employees and a projected annual turnover of around 2 million. It was a FU of sorts to stiff me out of my money, and I didn't want to take that lying down. To say I was furious was an understatement. Anyway, the day he made that offer, I handed in my resignation. This sent the CTO into panic mode because the CEO had refused an updated contract and I was still on a 1-month notice period. Plus, I had a lot of untaken paid leave. Basically, it meant that I was walking out right then and there. So, off I went that very same day, to the shock and surprise of everyone, I guess. The next day, I sent an official registered letter requesting my overtime and back pay and received a negative response, which I followed up with another detailed demand. This was also rejected because the bonus was discretionary and, quote, there is no overtime. However, I'd been seeking legal advice and I understood that they don't have a leg to stand on if I am willing to pay for an attorney. As the liability in such matters is firmly and 100% on the employer, I was willing. Now you need to understand that going to a lawyer was very rare in those parts back then, so companies didn't generally expect this outcome, and things have since changed. Now when going through the applicable laws with the attorney, I noticed there is a limitation of 7 years. So, while my attorney was laying out what to do in order to get me my money in as little as a few weeks, I just asked him, what if we wait until it's 6 years and 11 months after the transgression and then file demanding interest? I wanted this because the law stated that back pay is due at a 9% APR above the base rate, which was 3.25% at the time. It's accrued daily for every day past the due date. We're looking at around 12 to 12.5% compound daily APR. The risk is that the company folds in that time, but I decided to take that risk. I sent one final letter stating that I expect, and I quote, all the owed and accrued amounts to date, end quote, to be paid immediately. And of course, nothing happened. For the next few years, life rolled on. The company did grow and become a known player in the area. When the time came, I found an attorney and started the case. We had copies of all the communications, copies of the registered letters, and responses. The back pay demanded now, including interest, was $112,000. What I didn't know was that in addition to this, that there are fixed penalties for each instruction to perform uncompensated overtime. The total demand was something like $135,000. To say that the CEO, who was still the CEO, lost his crap would be an understatement. I got a very verbally abusive phone call, which I dutifully recorded as it wasn't completely unexpected, and was added to the filing. The CEO fought, or tried to, but when the judge heard the phone call, he took an immediate dim view. Reading through all the communication just put more nails in the defense's coffin. The judge just ruled and instructed the company to pay immediately and without delay, and also ordered the company to pay all my legal costs. They also got a full audit from the Department of Labor. The company paid up a week later. To add insult to injury, the evening of the court's decision, the CEO apparently got very drunk and crashed his car into another vehicle while drunk. He got a DUI conviction and lost his driving license for half a year, and his insurance refused to pay out for the damages to his vehicle, which is a brand new Mercedes S-Class, as he was drunk. All in all, a glorious day. This is a little bit of everything, man. This is ProRevenge malicious compliance style here. Hey, you followed the rules down to the letter, got the mega revenge, and then the CEO could not pull it together. Way to go, OP. I'll come back so long as Larry isn't there, posted by Reddit admin Dumb87. To give you some background on my friend Tim, made up name, he's been programming since he was like 7 years old. Tim said by the time that he got to college, he breezed through most of his comp sci classes because a lot of the content they were covering he'd already mastered years prior. Tim is an excellent programmer. Tim's career has been quite successful. He's worked for Google, Facebook, Amazon, and finally a hedge fund. The story starts at the hedge fund. Tim works with a lot of AI technology, and at this hedge fund, he was the lead programmer manager who spearheaded an effort to optimize their AI that helped them complete literally millions of trades a day. To say his work had a massive impact was an understatement. All of this going on with COVID-19 in the background, and due to the pandemic, they went to a work-from-home model, where my friend Tim kept working. During the work from home, Tim was looking around his fancy $4,500 NYC apartment and wished for things like a yard, heated pool, a nice 3-car garage, and not living in a high-rise. It dawned on Tim that he could leave New York City. Tim moves to Michigan. So Tim moved back to his hometown in Michigan, where he bought himself a really nice home with a heated pool, a 3-car garage, and a nice yard. And guess what the yard had in it? A mother-in-law suite, which was essentially a 2-bedroom, 1-bath second home on the property of his main home, which he turned into his man cave. It's actually pretty sick. Oh yeah, and his mortgage payment was far less than his $4,500 month rent, like half. Tim spent the rest of his pandemic work from home pounding out projects and so on. He never actually informed his employer on an official basis that he'd moved. He just kept working. Then the pandemic ended. The pandemic is finally over, back to the office, or... Tim's boss, Larry, calls him up and goes, "All right, Tim, on Monday we're starting work back at the office." And Tim goes, "Yeah, about that. I moved to Michigan." Larry is shocked and goes, "You didn't even ask if you could do that?" And Tim basically said, "Well, I didn't know I needed your permission to move," in a sarcastic as heck way. Larry insists that Tim needs to move back to NYC or he won't have a place on the team. Tim says he's been doing the exact same work from home at a high level for the past year. He's willing to travel to New York City for a few meetings a year on his own dime, but he feels that his quality of life is so much higher outside of New York City, and he has no desire to live in NYC. To which Larry said if Tim doesn't have any desire to live in NYC, then he has no desire to keep Tim employed. Now, dear Reddit, what do you think a talented senior programmer with over a decade of experience who specializes in AI technology is going to say to a response like that? If you're thinking that he quit, you'd be absolutely right, he quit. Maintaining complex code can be hard. Now, anyone that has done any programming knows that sometimes the best person to maintain that code is the person who wrote the code. There's logic, there's thought processes, there's just so much that goes into programming that can be so individualistic that it can be hard for someone to take over a code base that they didn't write. John, CEO, enters the picture. 6 weeks goes by when John calls Tim. John is the CEO of the hedge fund. John gets Tim to agree to consider coming back, so that's when John suggests that they fly Tim to NYC and he sits down with John. Tim, however, flipped the switch and said, "No, how about you fly out to Michigan and we discuss this?" Tim said that he said that because he wanted to establish that if he was going to come back, it was going to be him working from Michigan, and if he was going to talk to his employment, it was going to be done in Michigan. John agreed, and 2 days later flew out to meet with Tim. So Tim sits down and John says that they really need him because he provided a lot of value to the organization, and the programming team, they're struggling. John offers Tim the opportunity to come back with a 20% pay cut since he won't be living in NYC, and John called that a cost of living adjustment. To which Tim said, "No, I want a 15% raise above what I was earning." John sits back and responds, "The reason we pay what we pay is because we ask you to live in New York City, and we understand that's an expensive city to live in." To which Tim says, "Hey, you pay what you pay, and you pay it because I'm worth it. If I wasn't worth paying what you pay, you wouldn't be paying me. Now, my first condition is, if you want me back, it will be a 15% raise." John goes, "And second?" "The second condition is, I'll come back so long as Larry isn't there." John sighs. "Oh, you're asking for too much." To which Tim goes, "You don't need to bring me back if you don't want to. I'll be fine elsewhere." John goes, "I'll talk to the partners." And Tim says, "My offer is good till Friday." John goes, "Oh, what do you mean?" And Tim says, "Next Monday is when I'm going to start looking for work. This offer is good until Friday." And it was Tuesday. And then John leaves. That Thursday, the phone rings, and it's John. In conclusion, "Tim, we are transferring Larry to a different fund. He won't be working with you anymore, and we're fine with giving you a 15% raise. Can we send you an offer letter for you to sign?" Tim says, "Of course, and Larry is really gone?" John goes, "Yes, you'll never need to interact with Larry ever again." That was at the start of this year. Tim hasn't been in New York City, hasn't heard from Larry, and hasn't seen Larry on any communications, and so on. This story, if you ever see one story that is such a perfect example of the power that you can have and your knowledge and the value that you bring to your workforce, this is it right here. He moves out of state, far away. He gets a raise. He gets the old manager gone because they see the value and the power that he brings to their workforce. They wouldn't do it if he didn't bring the money and did not show, I say it again, value behind it all. OP, you nailed it. Terrorize my family, enjoy losing everything and going back to jail. Posted by Reddit's fan 9000. Myself and my wife had just had our second child and moved into a duplex in an amazing neighborhood, had its own playground even. We moved in and greeted the neighbors, bunch of younger people, but they seemed okay. The first day after moving in, we find that they're gone and they've left their 7-year-old on a school day outside of our door with a bag of goldfish and a note asking us to watch him while they went out. QCPS call number 1. The neighbors and me got along really well. The old guy next door repaired bikes for a hobby, and the next door neighbor did woodworking and would always come over to see the kids and send his grandkids over to play too. They warned us that our upstairs neighbors were trouble, constant traffic going in and out, and parties every single night. This was 110% the truth. It got to the point we couldn't sleep at night, and we had multiple altercations to the point that it was full-blown yelling matches. The landlord was useless and would do nothing to get rid of them, so I bided my time, and eventually, one night they came home in their red Mazda 3 and it was destroyed. They must have hit someone and ran, so I called the RCMP to let them know, at least the very least I figured they'd get in deep crap, but oh man, I had no idea what had just unleashed. Turns out the Dbag had a warrant out for his arrest for drug trafficking. He got hauled away in cuffs that night, and there's entitled woman 2 got a visit from CPS again as they left their son home alone again, and this wasn't once or twice, it was every single day. So my wife went digging for names and found the mother on Facebook. Using public record searches, we found out that they owed easy their home nearly $48K in assets as they'd taken off from the original address with all their furniture, including TVs and a huge sound system. 48 hours later, the sheriff was there with a box truck emptying their house. Took the beds, couches, TVs, the annoying subwoofer system, kitchen set, and even the dressers. CPS came shortly after and removed the child from the house. No, look, I didn't enjoy seeing him taken away, but they never fed him, and he was always in the same clothing, and it was falling apart. I mean, we even went out of our way to make sure that he had full meals when we couldn't let this kid starve. The Dbag went to jail for drug possession. He was out on bail, and he hid the drugs in a dresser they took. Entitled Woman 1 went to jail for assaulting the sheriff, and Entitled Woman 2 actually had a happy ending. Far as I know, after she lost her son, she went through multiple programs to clean herself up and started working to provide for her son. I ran into her a couple years ago, and she thanked me for what I did. I got pro-revenge on the drug dealer and his girlfriend, and thankfully helped someone get on the right path. Wow, this story reminds me of like you dig a hole with a shovel and the whole ground collapses underneath. Incredible detective sleuth work, OP Sherlock Holmes. World's nicest guy gets revenge on cheating ex-fiance by living his best life, posted by Unlikely Win Revenge. This is about a buddy of mine, the most decent guy you could ever be lucky enough to call a friend, and how he got nuclear revenge on his cheating ex-fiance who dumped him for his best friend, all the while still being the most upstanding, greatest guy that you can imagine. I've pieced this story together from things that my friend and his wife have told me over the decade that we've been friends. There's not enough room to tell you how great this guy is, but believe me, he's been there for me like a rock when things were darkest. Cast of characters. Let's call my friend Buddy, the ex-fiancée Lisa, and the hapless best friend Richard, aka Dick. As you read this story, you always have to remember that Buddy is literally the greatest guy on the planet. Dick is, well, kind of a jerk, annoying as heck, but my buddy says he always means well, and his heart is in the right place. Lisa is as big of a cheating, lying, self-centered narcissist as ever walked the face of the earth. Other people are Ray, another high school friend of Buddy and Dick, Jen, Buddy's wife, and Bob and Linda, Dick's dad and mom. All the names are fake. The background. Our story begins when Buddy, Dick, and Lisa are all in middle school together at a typical suburban high school outside Southern City. Football team, Friday night lights, and so on. The three of them are all in marching band, inseparable friends. If you know band types, Buddy plays the French horn, Dick plays the tuba. I don't know what Lisa played, probably the flute because it's like a cliche. Buddy and Lisa are the boyfriend and girlfriend, and Dick is a happy third wheel. As they get older, Buddy and Lisa explore the physical side of their relationship like normal high school kids do, while Dick is happy to be a player. He's decent looking, so he has no problem getting action, and also occasionally makes use of the professional women in their town. This will be important later. Buddy and Lisa, typical good students, go on to prestigious public university in Southern City. Dick drops out of high school, but a self-taught programmer winds up with a decent career in tech. Buddy graduates college early with honors and proposes to Lisa at his graduation dinner with a small diamond because he's put himself through school and that's all he can afford. She accepts. Buddy gets a job at fancy consulting firm in prestigious city, and Lisa finishes college back home in Southern City. Comes time for Lisa to graduate, Buddy helps his fiancée also get a job at fancy consulting firm. During her last spring break, she flies up to prestigious city to visit Buddy and interview for her job, and she gets pregnant. She flies back home, tells Dick that she's in trouble, and he takes her to the appointment building. Neither of them tell Buddy, ever. I heard about this from Buddy's wife, who heard it from Dick one night when he was drunk. As far as I know, Buddy still doesn't know. Buddy, if you ever read this, sorry dude, I should have told you, but it wasn't my place. The betrayal. Lisa realizes when she doesn't want to tell Buddy about her procedure that she can't marry him, but she's not brave enough to break it off. Instead, she ghosts him, and he finds out through the HR department of fancy consulting firm that she's turned down her job offer and won't be moving to prestigious city after all. Buddy calls Dick, and Dick says, "Dude, I'm sorry, but it's worse. Lisa and I are now a couple. You can punch me in the face next time that we get together." Somehow, Buddy and Dick decide that Lisa isn't worth destroying their friendship, so they stay best friends, going hunting together on Dick's family place in the country and so on. Lisa is not happy about this, but Dick tells her that if she makes him choose, he'll choose Buddy. The follow-up. Buddy takes a year or so to get over it and starts dating again. Pretty soon, he meets Jen and falls madly in love, crazy in love, and to make things better, Jen is just as crazy about him. In less than 6 months, they're engaged. Now, the thing you have to understand is that Lisa is drop-dead gorgeous. She's not tall enough to be a model, just average height, but she's got these giant blue eyes and super long eyelashes, long and shiny wavy dark brown hair, an exquisite face, and a terrific figure. She's prettier than a movie star, and being beautiful is really important to her. Jen is pretty enough, but regular, and she really and truly doesn't give a crap. Dick travels to prestigious city without Lisa to meet Buddy's fiancée. He and Jen really get along, and Jen gets along with like everybody, and reports back to Lisa that Buddy is really happy and his fiancée Jen is awesome and so on. Lisa gets jealous and pouty when she hears about Jen's Ivy League education, but then Dick makes a point of telling her that Jen is nowhere near as hot as Lisa, so she'll stop sulking at least until she gets an invitation to the wedding. Lisa pitches a fit, refuses to go, and tries to prevent Dick from going, but there's no way in heck he'll miss his best friend's wedding, so he goes stag. No big deal, it's a super small low-key wedding. But at the wedding, Dick reconnects with another high school friend of theirs, a guy named Ray, whose date to the wedding was actually someone else's wife. Ray has a thing for married women, and this is important. Buddy and Jen go on living their best lives. At some point, Buddy gets an Ivy League MBA. His career takes off like gangbusters. They pop out a couple of kids. Jen quits her career to be a stay-at-home mom. They're rich as heck, still crazy in love, and blissfully happy. A couple times a year, the guys get together and bring their wives along. At some point, Dick and Lisa get married. Buddy and Jen are not invited to the wedding, by the way. But the women get along okay. Jen gets along with everyone, and Lisa's happy because she's thinner and prettier than Jen, especially after both women have been through pregnancy and childbirth. The years tick on. Things get complicated. One day, this is around 2008, when Buddy, Jen, and Dick are all playing World of Warcraft together, Dick gets them on TeamSpeak, a voice chat program, and tells a heck of a story. Dick and Lisa have continued to hang out with Ray, their high school friend who has a thing for married women. He's turned his eye on Lisa, who, even after 3 kids, is hotter than she was in college. She's leaned heavily into the MILF role, while Dick has had enough of her nonsense. He's decided to divorce her, 3 times, but each time, when he tells her, she cries and gets all pouty. Then they have one last time, hanging out together. She gets pregnant, and then bam, Dick and Lisa's 3 kids. Ray goes in hard with this practice seduction routine, and Lisa cries to Dick that she just can't stand it, and can she please just do stuff with Ray? They do. Dick watches, goes in for more, and Lisa and Dick's marriage enters its suburban swinger era. Dick gives Jen and Buddy every gory detail over the course of a 2-hour conversation, the swinging, while they're all killing wolves on low-level alts in Elwyn Forest, and Lisa is upstairs with a bottle of wine. It's obvious during their next visit that Dick wants to join in on some fun times with Buddy and Jen, but they're not into that, and after an awkward 5 minutes, things go back to normal. The kids all play together, the women make small talk, and Buddy and Dick hang out together doing the normal things that guys do. Dick tells Buddy that the reason that they're into swinging is that he gets off on watching Lisa being degraded, and Lisa gets off on making Dick feels like he's not man enough for her. This marriage is not happy. But Dick wants to stay married because Lisa's hot as heck. She's got a solid career, and he's a mid-level tech guy with a GED who works from home while he takes care of 3 kids, so he'll never be able to do better. Things get worse. Dick calls Buddy to chat. His marriage has gone to heck. Lisa has, in her words, met the love of her life. She's moved on from Ray and from the swinging scene and is now having an affair with the guy from the accounting department at her job. She's staying out all night. She's ignoring the kids. Dick and Lisa take the kids on a swank vacation to try to focus on their family, and spends all her time crying because she misses her accounting partner and she doesn't want to be there. She doesn't want a divorce because she knows she'll lose the kids. She's drunk all the time, and she doesn't want to have to pay Dick child support. She wants him to let her live whatever life she wants, while he does all the cooking and cleaning and childcare and still brings in 50% of the household money. Lisa also will not shut the heck up about how she could have married Buddy and been like Jen, a stay-at-home mom in a giant 5,000 square foot house with 6 bedrooms and a pool. I should mention that Buddy has also had a Naval Longbottom style glow-up and gone from a nerdy band kid to a silver-haired, super confident, high-level executive in a top-tier consulting firm. Whereas Dick is still the guy working from his basement in sweatpants, covered in Dorito crumbs. He has been working on himself, but there's no way he can compete in Lisa's eyes, although both Buddy and Jen tell me about Dick's great qualities. Lisa is jealous, hopping mad, and she blames Dick. Dude, trust me, I know, she is bad news. Leave her, Buddy tells his friend. It is the last conversation they will ever have. Holy crap, this is terrible. Buddy gets a call at work one afternoon. It's Bob, Dick's dad. Dick got drunk, woke up Lisa at 3 a.m., told her that he never loved her, that she'd never been enough of a woman for him, that he'd been visiting ladies of the night during most of their marriage, and that he hoped that she would go to heck. Then he exited this world in such a way that the splatter went all over her and all over the bed. When the ambulance got there, she was hysterical, sitting on the curb outside the house, screaming over and over again, "Take me too, it's all my fault, it's all my fault." Later, Bob would call Buddy to tell him that Lisa specifically says he is not welcome at the funeral. Bob and Linda, Dick's parents, step in to take care of the 3 little kids who did nothing wrong and do not deserve this, while Lisa does nothing but work and drink. The coup de grace. About a year later, Buddy flies to Southern City to put flowers on Dick's grave and visit with Dick's parents, Bob and Linda. Bob is still in shock, but he and Linda have taken Lisa in as a daughter. Lisa's mom is dead, and she's no contact with her dad and stepmom, to try and help her through this as much as they can. Why did Lisa say it was all her fault, and why did she ban you from the funeral? Bob asked Buddy. What don't I know? What's the rest of the story? Why did Dick do it? The moment of ultimate revenge. Buddy thinks for a minute and decides that it will help Bob and Linda to understand the tragedy that happened to their son if they know the full story. So he tells them everything. Bob and Linda have continued to do everything for the 3 kids, and they continue to treat Lisa well because that is best for the children. But the clock is ticking. Lisa's remarried now. When the kids are old enough, Bob and Linda will tell them the whole story. The youngest kid will be 18 soon. Buddy is still grieving over his friend. What did Buddy do to get revenge on his cheating ex-fiancée? For one, he stayed friends with the guy who stole her, letting her know how important she was to him versus the friendship. 2, moved on and married someone smarter, nicer, and less pretty, letting her know how important her best quality, or her only good thing about her, was to him. Had a heck of a successful career coming in number 3, causing her much jealous anguish. Number 4, had a massive glow up between 30 and 40, causing her much jealous anguish. Number 5, had a terrific marriage, causing her much jealous anguish and also letting her know that the problem in their relationship was not him. Number 6, respected her boundaries when she uninvited him to his best friend's funeral, causing best friend's dad to ask the fateful question that, in my opinion, ticks this over from karma to nuclear. Now, proof that living well is indeed the best revenge. Sucks about Dick though. Buddy says he was the kind of guy who would come to your house when all heck broke loose, clean your fridge, and make a 5-star dinner with whatever he could find. Nuclear vengeance wasn't worth the cost. I wish I had known him. If there's a subreddit, and there is, beyond nuclear revenge, this would go there. It destroys the entire life. Dick is no longer with us, Lisa is in shambles, and you just cannot get any crazier than the 6 reasons, I think there were 6, there were so many given, that just point after point not only got regular revenge, but hit where it hurt the most. This is textbook nuclear revenge. Check out my next ProRevenge compilation here to continue your listening session, and thank you so much for checking this one out.